Welcome to the How Did That Work Out podcast, where we share, explore, as well as inspect internally and externally a variety of our life situations as well as others, all for the purpose of answering, how did that work out? I'm your host, Graham.
And I'm your host, Mike J.
Here we go.
Welcome to our very first episode, what we're calling episode 0 of the How Did That Work Out podcast. This is a podcast where we intend to explore internally and externally decisions, outcomes, situations of people, whether it's our own personal experiences, but also others that we may know of, or even things we may read about in the news. Basically, we love talking about everything. And my co-host Graham is with me here today. And what we want to do is we want to introduce the show and kind of talk about what the show is about, what we're about, and why you might want to listen.
Yeah, how it all started, the humble beginnings.
Right, exactly. Very humble beginnings.
Introspection over coffee.
and that's really how it started, isn't it, Graham? I mean, we started, when did we started having coffee at each other's homes? This was before COVID, obviously, but how long ago was that?
Neither of us can remember. I'm going to say a couple of years.
A couple of years? Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember that very first time I invited you over for coffee. So the idea was, what I wanted was a time for us to maybe just talk amongst ourselves, right? Every time we'd get together, we'd have, our wives, and Graham, you have a child. And a lot of times we didn't really get to talk about our stuff, whether it was work or geeking out or whatever it was. We found that we had to pay attention to the additional people in the room. So I had this idea, kind of sneaky idea, that, hey, if I invited Graham over for coffee in the mornings, once a week, we could talk about whatever we wanted to talk about. We wouldn't necessarily have to accommodate, other people in the room. It could just be us and the things that we want to talk about. And so, Graham, I just said, hey, how about, what is it? I think it started on a Wednesday. Hey, Wednesday morning, how'd you like to come over for some coffee before work, right?
Yeah, just some candid guy chat. And it's important to probably point out that at that time we hadn't known each other very long. We were new neighbors, and so we spent that time basically getting to know each other, swapping stories, swapping lies. No, but just kind of figuring out places we align and some of the similarities we had in our histories, and some of the disparities. It was really interesting. Missed those days.
Well, and I think that kind of caught me off guard, believe it or not, in a good way, in the sense that, first of all, I didn't know how you would react to the invitation. Like you said, we were kind of new neighbors. I mean, we had all gotten along. Gosh, we had a neighborhood barbecue, and that's when we first met y'all, and we got along. All of us got along great, from the get-go. And then I thought, okay, am I going to ruin this if I invite Graham over for coffee and Graham gets to know too much about me? Is that going to chase him away? But I took a chance. I just thought it was a good opportunity. And I know that as a guy, I don't really get to talk much about what's going on in my life or in my mind. We're always in mixed company. So usually you want to kind of focus on the other folks in the room. So I noticed that, this could be an outlet for us to really get things out that we wouldn't normally share, in an open conversation.
Well, it's funny is in these sort of pandemic times, I'd found myself yearning for just that, water cooler chit chat that you have with other guys. And I caught myself I'll have a call with a professional friend, someone I'm friendly with and that I know really well. And, my tone after, at any point in the call, beginning, during, or after, it'd be so, you want to chat? And most of the times they do, but I also feel like they're just hey, I got stuff to do.
Well, and that's kind of, I also thought about the time that we would start these coffee chats was before work in the morning and
Bright and early.
bright and early. And I thought, you know what? It's a good way to kind of wake up, shake out the cobwebs so that by the time we're done with our coffee, not only are we amped from the caffeine, but we're also alert and awake because we just had a real good conversation. So I found that I was, more fresh for work. I was able to be more productive for a couple of reasons, right? Number one, again, you're getting amped up on coffee, but also because we had really good conversation. And like you said, I think we discovered we had so much in common, and yet for our differences, we found that we can disagree without, having to hate one another just because we have different views.
That's a novel idea these days. I never really drew this line before, Jay, but as we're talking about it today, I used to have a boss that liked to do breakfast meetings.
Mm-hmm.
8 a.m. at the 24 diner or something. And you're like, who doesn't want breakfast, especially if it's being paid for by your boss? So we'd go, I don't know, once every month or two, have some breakfast, have a very informal, unscripted meeting, and you walk out of it going, that was awesome. And I ate a lot of pancakes.
A win-win, huh?
Yeah, well, it's starting to remind me of that a little bit.
Well, I think it went great. I mean, to the point where, I found myself looking forward to it. And then there would be times we'd be too busy, right? We would have things come up and we couldn't have coffee, every week.
Yeah.
Or actually, I started it like every other week. That way, it wouldn't be, too much Jay too soon. kind of like spread it out, and so we did it we tried every other week. And then sometimes, gosh, we would go as long as a month without having coffee. But then I was like beaming when I would get a message from you out of the blue saying, man, I miss my coffee. Let's, when are we going to do this? We lots to share.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where we would actually look forward to that. And we would then, we were getting up to like 2 hours at a time, just catching up, because we would skip a few weeks.
Yeah. And there's so much to talk about, especially when you're getting to know somebody, just kind of as a person, where they stand, as a neighbor. There's just I love to share information. I wouldn't say I'm proactive about it, but man, you align the stars just so, and you can't shut me up. Which I know a lot of people wouldn't. Anyone who knows me probably wouldn't believe that, but I think this has demonstrated that.
Well, I know it was a great way to get to know a neighbor better. And it was, again, just an opportunity, right? To kind of cut away from the noise, cut away from other responsibilities for just a little bit, right? To essentially bond with another person, a neighbor, another man, where we could do the guy talk thing. And then, when it came around, I think it was just before the holidays, I had mentioned that I wanted to do a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had a rough idea what I wanted it to be. And you had mentioned, well, what if we turned our coffee talks into the podcast? And I thought that was an incredible idea, so that we would be two people talking, during a podcast rather than one guy trying to keep things interesting, for a half hour, whatever. And I loved that idea. And I mean, what brought that idea to the forefront of transferring our morning coffee talks to, a weekly podcast?
Yeah. I mean, it just seems really like a natural idea. We both have time commitments, so I'm sure efficiency played in there at some fraction of a percentage. But I mean, as we're saying, we found some value in those talks. We went away with good thoughts and ideas, and we exchanged some anecdotes, and I don't know. I think we both kind of felt like there might be some value for our peers or, people who are coming up in the world, whether they're at that 18 to 25 stage or they're just making their first money or whatever. So it seemed like hey, a lot of people might find this boring, but I think there's some really good nuggets of, I'll go out on a limb and call it wisdom in there, from our two grizzled life veterans.
No, that's a great way to put it. And I think that, at least when I had the idea of doing a podcast, again, not really having fleshed out the whole, this is what it's going to be about, one of those flashes just went into my head going, when you try to impart wisdom on your kids, my kids are grown, but all through their teenage years and even now that they're young adults, I found that they don't necessarily want dad's wisdom. And I thought, okay, but usually when you pass things down to the next generation, that's kind of how you keep, that's kind of the legacy you leave for yourself. And I thought, well, if my kids don't want my wisdom, how shall I get this out? And I thought, well, maybe a podcast can do that. So the nugget of the idea is that this podcast would be about the wisdom that I wish to pass on to my children, but they don't really want.
There it is. It was either this or a series of TikTok videos.
Yeah. And with me having a face for radio, I figured the TikTok thing, not so good.
Well, and it's tricky, right? Disseminating that wisdom, because it's just time-tested, sort of a barrier between child and parent. There's throughout my life, I've had so many of those woke moments or epiphanies of, oh, that's what they meant, or oh, they were right. But what's even more sort of like jarring or unsettling than realizing you weren't taking good advice for a long time is when you get the "I told you so" follow up. So for me personally, I still don't take a lot of advice from my parents. I'm just, child parent paradigm, but it's whether parents know it or not, it's getting taken. They just sometimes they want to avoid the "told you so."
Yeah, it then becomes kind of a matter of pride, right? Where you dare not admit that, what mom and dad told you were actually, spot on. I would agree with that. I mean, my oldest son, he's 26. And I remember a couple of years ago, he called me and we were talking about some things and he goes, and you know what, Dad? I now get it. I know what you were trying to teach me, and you were right. And that was not because being right is so awesome. What I mean by that is that he understood where I was coming from as a parent. I wasn't trying to impede on his life. I wasn't trying to, purposefully, get in the way of anything or hamstring him in any way. So the fact that he understood all of that is really what mattered most, to me. And so with that whole, when your kids are ready, and I say your kids, I mean, mine are, again, grown young men, but when your kids are ready to hear it, it may not be the same time that you're ready to impart it. And so I thought, well, why don't we do this as double duty? This is an opportunity to share with our listeners some of our life's experiences and our lessons learned, maybe along with the things that if our children were to listen to these episodes, or their kids after, perhaps we're gone, this could be our legacy, while also helping others that are listening to our show. And that really excited me, is the fact that we could help others, not just our own direct families. This goes beyond that.
Yeah, at least ideally. And I feel like that moment when your boy told you, I get it. There's that petty part of anyone that's just doing a little bit of that sort of like, yes, move inside of them. But I think what's really happening is you were trying to make a very specific human connection by planting some wisdom, saving him some pain, and it connected. It happened. And that's huge. And, very horrible sort of segue, but that's what we're here to do, is we're trying to put out things that connect. And we're also, at some point, we're trying to invite people to share their experiences with us to be either read on the show or considered on the show. And we've got an email address. You can send us your anecdotal experiences or a secondhand experience that just stuck with you, or some advice somebody gave you down the road. Send it to us at advice@hdtwo.show.
All right. So that's short for how did that work out, right? So advice, ADVICE at hdtwo.show. That's great, because that was another thing that we had discussed, right, Graham, was that we want this show to be interactive. We don't want it just to be a couple of guys, spewing, when I was young stories. We want it to be an interactive experience for our listeners as well. And so if you do have something that that you've gone through, a lesson that you've learned that you would like to share, or maybe you're going through something and not really sure how you would want to approach that. We're not here to solve things, but we'd love to even perhaps talk about that with you, or on your behalf, talk through it. So for this show to succeed, we really do believe that it needs to be interactive. So if you have something that you want to get out there, or even if you don't want it, you don't have to be named or anything like that. But if you're going through something, want some help, we're here to do that. But if you also want to share a lesson learned, we're all about that, because that's kind of what we're basing this show on, was how did that work out? Meaning, what did you try? Okay. And did it work out or did it not? And either way, what did you learn from that? Right. Because there's always a takeaway, isn't there, Graham?
Yeah, there is. There's always something to be learned from it, whether you like it or not.
Exactly.
I'll give you a guiding piece of sage advice that was handed to me from my mother, of all people. Don't know how specific it was to me, but it was something she decided to share, and it was, if you're going to be stupid, you better be tough.
Well, that's a good one. That is a good one.
Yep, and that's, as I see other parents raising their children, boys typically have this very alpha, take it head on, got to feel the pain to learn the lesson. And that's how you get tough. Just banging into it over and over again.
Well, and by no means do we want to rob or deny anybody of their, growth through pain, because adversity does build character.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that, right? But at the same time, I think we all could use a little guidance, even when we're not sure where to turn. And so it's not always about solving your problems, right? Or when your mom, told you that, I think, she basically, was coming from a really good place to say, it's still your choice, right? It's still your choice how you want to approach things. But if you're going to approach it a certain way, you're gonna have to be tough.
Absolutely. That's all well said.
Well, and then as that translates to the show, I think that, this show would probably appeal, perhaps more to men than women. Not that women aren't, welcome. We would love our female listeners to also share and interact with the show as well. But as we're a couple of guys, we don't really know the female experience. We know our experiences growing up as boys, rough and tumble, and going through our various stages of manhood. But I also felt that men have very few outlets or means to receive help and guidance, especially in today's world, and maybe even back then. In the generations before us, men never talked about their feelings, and yet we can talk about our feelings now, but to whom? Only because men aren't really encouraged. Sometimes we're scolded for not, but then when we do, then we need to man up. Right. So as guys, we're always expected to be macho, yet we're always expected to be sensitive. And so it can be a challenge, for men to find their place in the world. And would like for this show to, as the world has kind of gone batshit crazy, with everything that's going on in the world. I want to, share with men at their various stages in life that you can do your own thing and succeed. And hopefully our stories, our anecdotes, but also the stories that we share of others will point to the proof that you can do your own thing and you can succeed, and you can also find ways to positively express yourself or to learn things from others like we're willing to share. So I just felt that men kind of needed a place where you could feel good about, getting some words of wisdom, learning from others, and then maybe even sharing a bit of yourself should you feel compelled.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll put my own little spin on it too. There's especially with this past year that's behind us, access to mental health resources is become a lot easier, and until we get sponsorship, I won't mention any names, but there is a male archetype that is expected. The sort of expectation of that archetype is very alive today, and it's expected to be steady and decisive. So to ask questions about emotions, or ask for help with emotions, or to indicate weakness, or things like that are not steady and decisive, are very unsavory through the lens of that archetype.
Very much agreed. Very much agreed. It's almost to a point where, well, how do you win?
Most toys. Most toys wins.
Yeah, the most toys. Because either you're too masculine, right? Or you're not masculine enough and you need to man up, toughen up, bite the bullet, grab the bull by the horns, name your metaphor, right? But it's basically, though, the show is an opportunity. Again, going over to me here is that I'd wanted to be a life coach for some time. And I think with a podcast where, perhaps, Graham, we're kind of exploring outcomes of various decisions, life's lessons, and how those outcomes came about from those life lessons. This allows me to kind of be that life coach that I wanted to be without actually, having somebody, having to book somebody, book my whole day with, different clients and whatnot. I think, we can get it out once a week, explore those things, look for those positive outcomes, even if they seem negative on the surface. Perhaps there is something positive we can take from that. And then just a means to, mix our talents and interests. I mean, that would mean that the show would hopefully avoid boredom because, we've got a lot of talents and interests. We're creative, but we're also methodical. We're all these things that don't just line up to a particular column and we don't stay there. We venture over into other areas of interest. And so I think that if we share that openly, that we avoid that boredom trap that might come from other podcasts where it's like, okay, they're going on and on about the same thing. And that's great if you want to have a very specific topic. But for us, the topic is a little broader than that. And that is basically, how did that work out?
There it is. You want to take a little break?
Yeah, let's do it.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the follow button now, wherever you're listening from. Now, back to the show.
All right, and we're back.
Hey.
So when we left off, we were talking about, what we wanted the show to be, what we didn't want the show to be. But now let's talk about, what qualifies us to actually talk about this sort of thing, right? How did that work out? Or even the analysis that goes with that. And so, you might ask, okay, well, who is Mike J? And so, I'm Mike J, and I have lots of real world experience. I'm 51. So when I say lots, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily in my golden years, but have been around the block once or twice. I served twice in the military, and in those 2 times, I had 2 overseas combat tours. So I went from a buck private to an NCO, non-commissioned officer, which also is a sergeant in that time. So I've had leadership accomplishments, and I've also had those soldier and young guy fails where, at one point I was the youngest guy in my unit at my first assignment because I joined the Army when I was fresh out of high school. So I've got lessons learned, some the hard way, most the hard way. And throughout my life, I've, held positions from my first job being a pet shop employee. So yes, I was a pet shop boy. And then I went to, entrepreneur, and now, again, in my early 50s, I'm a senior technology pro and have been most of my adult life. So I'd like to, share those successes and failures that I've experienced along the way with each of you. And I've also been divorced and remarried, so I've lost everything in a divorce, but I've also rebuilt. And I'm proud to say I'm in a really good place. I've been married, going on 15 years now with my second wife, and the father of 3 grown children. And if raising children doesn't teach you a thing or two, I don't know what will. So there's a lot of things that go with being Mike J. A lot of things that I'd like to share with you. And again, hopefully keep it interesting. There's a lot of other things you might learn about me along the way, because again, I do intend to share openly and honestly. So I really want to help our listeners get ahead in life by doing their own thing, but also maybe helping them make better decisions on their own based on those experiences. So with that, Graham, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, man. Thanks for that. I'm Graham. I think I'll probably lead with, I'm a father, a husband, and a byproduct of liberal hippies. Much like Jay, I've experienced a lot of loss and rebuilding. I think unconventional is a really good word to describe my upbringing, my educational background, and the way I've approached life. Just free form without a specific template, just trying to be good to myself and good to other people along the way. Also senior in the world of tech, supporting marketing folks and creatives, traveled around much of the world. Life's been a blast, and it's offered me a lot of lessons, some firsthand, some secondhand, and some are still yet to come. Always learning, always running into different people that teach me things along the way.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Well, that about does it for this episode. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Hope we're able to share something of value with you, and looking forward to doing the same with you next week. But you never know what we're going to talk about, so be sure to tune in.
Neither do we. This has been a good one.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Graham, and thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
If you're interested in learning more about today's topic, be sure to sign up for our email list at hdtwoshow.substack.com. Don't forget to tell your friends.